Do you see the New York Times call for a reality czar?
A reality czar?
Yes.
Oh, that's already what they are, isn't it?
But I'm sorry, they said a task force. So that'll be more like a Ministry of Truth.
No, they're talking about a cross-agency of experts coming together to tackle disinformation and, quote, domestic extremism.
Yeah, Luke, it's called a Ministry of Truth.
Yeah, the realities are. I mean, but that's not even the bigger story here. The person who called for it, the New York Times, officially called for this with their article by Kevin Rose, saying that this is a good idea and that this is needed.
That's horrible.
Where have we come where we have the New York Times of all publications, the publication that, by the way, told the American people that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They were the first ones to sell that lie to the American people. And now they're telling us we need a Ministry of Truth. We need a reality czar. We need to have control of information that they're going to be working with tech platforms on, along with the government, making sure that information is, of course, held in the hands of the very few. It's repugnant to see this.
Here's my favorite part. So wait, we have the article from the New York Times. It says, appoint a reality czar. Several experts I spoke with recommend the Biden administration put together a cross-agency task force to tackle disinformation and domestic extremism, which would be led by something like a reality czar. It sounds a little dystopian, I'll grant, but let's hear them out.
Sounds a little dystopian.
No. We don't hear them out. It's like a guy coming and being like, we would like to have a camp set up where you can take people who believe bad things and are causing problems to place them for a certain period of time and then maybe teach them things to change the disinformation. That way they're no longer a threat to society. And I know it sounds bad,
dystopian,
but
hear
me out. No, I'm not going to hear you out. We don't want a Ministry of Truth in this country.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The news publication that lied to us and led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people meaninglessly, that led to a migrant crisis, is not going to be lecturing me about how truth needs to be controlled by central forces in the government. What they're talking about here is essentially the tech platforms working with experts from agencies all around the United States government to fight conspiracy theories. They're the biggest pushers of conspiracy theories.
100%.
And
Look at
it's just a
Russiagate.
slap in the face.
Yeah.
That's one out of thousands of other examples we can make.
And with the New York Times, it goes so much further back. We were talking about this on the show, I think the last time I was here, and how the Holodomor was covered up by the New York Times. Their journalist, and he won the Pulitzer Prize for covering it up.
Amazing.
And so the press has always been horrible. And the idea that they would talk about conspiracy theories when they just spent the last 3 years claiming without any evidence that the president of the United States was a Russian asset who's
They're
being
bringing it
controlled
back,
by
baby.
Putin.
They're bringing it back.
Are they trying to make the same
Jimmy
argument?
Kimmel saying Wall Street bets, probably some Russian bots.
How this is like? Don't they have to understand how ridiculous that is?
They do,
And they're laughing at us.
Here's the thing. When you look at the media channels, let me do this. I'm gonna do a segment throwback.
Do it.
I'm gonna show you this image. We're gonna drag the Young Turks.
Yes.
Tim, I don't want to do that.
This is Michael
They're
Tracy.
heavy. I don't
He
wanna drag
tweeted,
them.
"LOL, if you are really this obsessed with my tweets, seek help." And it is TYT Live. AOC's horrifying details of Capitol riot offend pathetic Michael Tracy. Who cares about Michael Tracy? And I mean no disrespect. I follow him. I think he's a good journalist,
he's
but
great.
he's not like a politician who's doing it. He's a guy on Twitter. He's a journalist. This is ridiculous.
Yep.
And so the point is, you look at how the media reacts to these stories. That's what's acceptable. That's the kind of news that they deem acceptable.
Crazy. When there's a slow news day, don't try and make news. Just focus on the Federal Reserve. Break it apart.
There you go.
love it.
Well, there you go.
Something tells me they're not going to do that anytime soon, but
Yeah.
man, do I wish.
I highly doubt that.
Well,
Tucker Carlson actually brought up the Federal Reserve and the larger economic impacts that they're having on society, which is really surprising, seeing him say, hey, we should be focusing on the Fed, which was quite mind-boggling.
When did he do this?
Yesterday.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah. But again, other individuals in the mainline establishment media, their lies, they're harmful. And they're amplified, and they're promoted with rigged algorithms that, of course, have their insider buddies promoting them so you see them first, and you have no other option, even if you search for news, and even independent news. There was even a time where you typed in and searched for my news organization. You couldn't find it. You would get articles with the mainstream media bashing me. So it's just absolutely ridiculous. But another layer here we need to understand that's critically important is that the big tech social media companies, the technocrats, are really the ones in charge that are pushing a lot of this nonsense, that are controlling the conversation, controlling the narratives. And this is why issues like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are being brought up, and then dunking and criticizing and attacking individuals like Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Michael Tracy, all of them is in my opinion coordinated, because we have seen attacks on on three of these individuals in such a way that really is perplexing, because it absolutely makes no sense. There's no rational sense to attack them from a logical perspective.
What did they go after Jimmy Dore for?
Hold on. You mean from an honest perspective?
Yes.
Logically, it makes tons of sense. Michael Tracy, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore are all rather left-wing individuals. I don't necessarily think it's fair to say Michael Tracy is left-wing, because I don't think he tweets about supporting left-wing policy. He's just heterodox. And Glenn Greenwald actually is fairly progressive, and Jimmy Dore is definitely on the left.
Yeah.
When they challenge the machine and the establishment, it's very difficult. Listen, when we saw Donald Trump as president, you had one side hate Donald Trump. And this is the point I was going to bring up with the Young Turks. Think about the people who watch the Young Turks and are sitting there going like, oh, Michael Tracy, like he's so dumb, like, oh, so stupid. These people are, with all due respect, not, what's the right word I want to say without calling them a disparaging term? Just there's different tiers. No. There's different tiers of individuals. There's those that would prefer to listen to some like hardcore, boring, 7 men from Tajikistan were arrested today. And there's like very straightforward news. Then you get people who will watch this more conversational, but a little higher level. And then you get people who are like, I want to hear about AOC yelling at Michael Tracy. And so they watch that.
Kardashians.
When you're trying to tell people about what's going on, and when you're trying to convince people of policy, but you have half this country that just mindlessly follows along these ridiculous narratives, how do you convince them to make better moves that will help themselves? It's very, very difficult. So what happens is you get people who might begrudgingly vote for Trump. Why? Critical race theory is bad, for instance. James Lindsay is a good example. He's a left-wing guy. He challenges the system. He says, I'm going to vote for Trump because, Trump's better for these reasons. Joe Biden is the establishment who's going to do everything that the left hates and everything the right hates combined. He's going to bring it all together. You end up with this very difficult scenario. But in the media, it's really easy to split the left and the right. Mm-hmm. You got people who supported Trump. Well, tell everybody Orange Man is bad. Most of these people who watch like the Young Turks and just want to hear the drama will believe it. What happens when you get Wall Street? When you get Wall Street bets?
Oh, boy.
When you get GameStop? Well, now all of a sudden, these people who have been told over and over again by the likes of the Young Turk that Wall Street bad, well, you can't just change their mind now and say Wall Street good. So what do? Well, they distract. They try and shift the focus away. They bring up AOC. They want a reality czar to make sure that you're not thinking about the wrong thing. There was one article in The Nation where they said that Wall Street bets like Trumpism and QAnon, you see what they try and do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
When they can't give you a dividing line on Trump because half the country hates Trump, they try and shift the narrative and give you tabloid drama.
Well, it's hilarious, though, because I think a lot of people on the left are willing to see this with this situation now. The media might have screwed themselves here, at least to some extent, because there are a number of people on the left. And you look at like Reddit is often pretty left-leaning politically. And so when they see themselves being associated with white supremacists or with Donald Trump because they're upsetting people on Wall Street, they might start to think maybe these terms don't actually mean anything. Because this is also something that the vast majority of people who have heard of are very much in favor of. Like most people who have seen the Wall Street bet story, they think it's hilarious. And so when you start telling them, well, actually the people who are disrupting the stock market and raising the price of the stock for GameStop and hurting this hedge fund are white supremacists, it sort of opens up their eyes and they think, oh, maybe conservatives are telling the truth when they say that word is just thrown around or that phrase is just thrown around and doesn't mean anything.
Well, you start to notice that if they're calling the people who are having fun with Wall Street bets white supremacists, they might just be calling anyone that. And that means that maybe you should rethink what you've been thinking about conservatives. Maybe that's not what they're saying. Maybe they're not telling you the truth.
100%, and they've overplayed their hand, and this is what they did with the word racist. They almost never say racist anymore. They always say white supremacist, because after the 2016 election, they realized that it was not effective anymore. Yeah. And so Trump won, despite the fact that he was called racist all the time, so they said, let's switch to a heavier term. Let's be even more explicit. Let's call them white supremacists. And so they started doing that. And now they're calling Redditors who are buying stock white supremacists. So they've ruined that term for themselves, too. I don't know what the next one's going to be.
We saw Financial Times say that some of these people were alt-right. And then they had to retract that and be like, okay, that's not true.
Too much. Too much.
Now they're just going for it. Now they're like, okay, look, we need to manipulate people. And the scary thing is, that's why I mentioned the Young Turks. That's why I mentioned the Michael Tracy story. There are people who will just literally believe whatever the media puts out. Mm-hmm. That's it. And they'll follow whatever story the media tells them to follow. And then you have the grifter lefties on YouTube who'll be like, slay queen, woo. And it's like, weren't you just mad at Wall Street? Like, without naming this particular individual, you have one guy who's like, Antifa is good, you know, and they're destroying small businesses and whatever, but it's because they're fighting the machine. Then 25,000 troops get deployed to DC, and they literally lock down the entire city in a military occupation. And the same guy who was cheering Antifa goes, this is a good thing. I'm in favor of the military lockdown. I'm like, dude, do you have any real opinions? You're just supporting whatever it is the right doesn't like.
I think the problem I have with this conversation is that we're like, okay, this fire is burning and destroying things. And see, I'm scooping fuel into the fire right now. We're going to scoop some fuel into this fire by talking about it.
No, you're wrong.
That's what we're doing right now.
We're spraying water on
But you're saying, look, having this conversation is scooping fuel in, just so you know, because we're becoming the media that's talking about it.
You're wrong. We're spraying water on it right now.
I wholeheartedly disagree. When we bring this crap up and go talk about this junk, we're propelling it, but we're acknowledging that that is what we're doing. So when we're showing people this, if you're falling for this and you're talking about it, you're fueling it.
So when we literally do a segment saying, don't fall for the tricks of the media and the manipulation and focus on what matters, we're making it worse.
Yes, we're like, don't fall for this, and we're doing it.
What are we doing?
We're fueling the fire.
What fire? What are you talking?
The fire of Michael Tracy
we're
and the media talking crap.
This is the media's manipulation, and we're focusing on the New York Times calling for a Biden reality czar to manipulate what you can know. If we don't talk about that and people don't know they're doing it, then they'll get away with it. We're not talking about AOC.
That's why we're like,
criticizing
hey, look,
the Young Turks for doing this.
This is how the fire is fueled. That's what we're doing right now, and we're doing it, and we're showing them this is how it's done. This is
the fire. The fire is when you get left-wing channels like the Young Turks telling you not, like, creating content that shifts your focus away from high-level issues like media manipulation and hedge fund manipulation and tells you to pay attention to some dude on Twitter. What we're doing is we're calling that out a step back and saying, don't let the media manipulate you. So you need to pay attention to Wall Street. You need to pay attention to the hedge funds, and don't let them divide us. I'm not going to sit here and rag on AOC because she was scared. I respect her telling her story. I understand why she was scared. I think what she does when she promotes this stuff is bad politically because she's essentially just using, whether she knows it or not, these PR tactics to shift the narrative onto her to build up more, press attention and things like that. And I fully recognize that we give her attention when we talk about it. I'm not super worried about that. My issue is they want us fighting. They want us mad at AOC. They want us yelling at her. No, I would like her to actually tweet more about Wall Street and the hedge funds. I respected that. I praise that. Rashida Tlaib as well. I don't want them to divide us. And I think it's important that we sit here and say, look what the New York Times is now saying. Biden should have a reality czar, a task force to stop disinformation. But we're calling them out for being the liars.
It makes me think, have you ever read 1984? It's the Orwell book.
The Ministry of Truth.
There's a point. Yeah, the Ministry of Truth is like this reality czar. In the book, they have this hour of hate where every day they have everybody sits in front of the TV for an hour and just thinks about hate. And that's like what this stuff is. They're just trying to drive people to hate.
I think it can
disagree. I would disagree because I think that what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is doing is very clever and very cynical, and something that no one has really touched on is the fact that she's talking about cops. She's rolling it into her own rhetoric, and she's talking about how the cop made her feel unsafe. That's a very clever way of bringing your ideas into the conversation and bringing emotion in with it as well. You were terrified. It was a cop. You didn't know if you were going to be like poor George Floyd or whoever has been most recently assaulted by a policeman. You keep bringing up constantly.
So I think it's fair to disagree with AOC, but when like I mentioned earlier, like she does this Instagram thing, and I'm kind of like, okay, like that's fine. I understand her story, okay. But what's happening now is Rolling Stone, Newsweek, Young Turks, etc. are putting this into everyone's face. That's fire. We are telling you, don't get distracted by the drama. Don't let the manipulation and the low-level, conversations dominate your minds. So what we're doing now is we're discussing the idea of media manipulation, a Ministry of Truth reality czar, because in my opinion, if they did have a reality czar, first of all, that's psychotic. It's insane. But it would essentially, their goal would be to make sure we don't talk about these conversations. We just had Luke calling out, the human rights abuses in Yemen. We're talking about voting for war and these emotionally manipulative tactics. They don't want us talking about it. And I mean by like the New York Times, the politicians, they want us distracted. They want to take a story AOC put out that has no bearing on my life or anyone else's and make it a major news story so we stop talking about hedge funds and Wall Street and the short sellers, which we're talking about now. That's the point of this segment. That's the point of doing things like this.
Have you heard that statement, that phrase by Marshall McLuhan? It says, the medium is the message. Yeah. And in that sense, if we choose to spend 2 hours talking about the problems in the media, we've actually become the problem in the media.
How does that make sense?
Because we're stooping to that level. We're acknowledging the mud, but in order to do that, we have to get in the mud. So it's good to talk about it and to point it out, but to revel in it is when it becomes an issue. Like if we've already spent 40 minutes talking about it.
So we have two different issues. First, we addressed the tabloid drama nonsense and how it distracted. We shifted into the New York Times wanting to have a reality czar and what that means for the country. And so the way I see it is, look, you've got a problem. If you want to put a fire out and save the people from the fire, you got to run into a burning building. So we could choose not to talk about any of this and let it fester and grow and get worse, or we can use our platform to challenge it and say, this is BS, and we have to call it out to address it as a problem. And then quite literally what we're doing is the solution, letting people see and hear our ideas. And if they agree with us, then those ideas propagate.
You've changed my mind.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, nice. I like
It's
that.
awesome. You know, and I have to say, man, I've never seen you that fired up about anything on the podcast. I actually really appreciate it.
Haven't you ever seen the arguments we've had?
It's good times.
No, I guess not enough of them.
They're out there.
He got fired up. Those, I haven't seen that from Ian before.
Media manipulation.
It's a double-edged
drives me
sword.
insane.
You haven't been watching.
I hear you. Yeah, fair enough.
Look, it's a double-edged sword, right? So I've done numerous videos ragging on Democrats, recognizing that it's convenient for the establishment to have the partisan divide. But how do you, and this is why I love the GameStop story, how are you supposed to point out that it typically is Democrats causing the problems? Don't get me wrong. Republicans, to a great degree, causing problems as well.
Never.
There's just slightly more Republicans than Democrats who are doing better, but they're all just so awful, right? So when you have Donald Trump and his critics are so insane that you're like, this is not legitimate criticism of a president, and you need to call it out. I get emails from people all the time saying, how do I convince my family members that the media is lying to them? And I'm like, show them the truth. And they're like, yeah, but they don't believe it. They don't want to watch the news. They don't want, when I send them a link saying, here's the real video of Donald Trump, they say, I'm not watching that. And now it's really, really simple. Show them reddit.com and then Google search Reddit Silver. And then what you see is on Google, all of these news stories, dozens, hundreds saying Reddit says buy silver, and then show them reddit.com. Do not buy silver. It's there. The veil has been shattered. Now we're getting this tabloid drama trying desperately to shift the narrative away to something unfalsifiable. This story about AOC and Michael Tracy is a really good example of an excellent manipulation tactic. There's no right or wrong answer. It is a tribal agreement or disagreement. Do you not like AOC? Do you like AOC? Therefore, there's no way to look at that story and call it fake news. They've been able to now attempt this media attack to trick boomers, for the most part, into buying silver when Reddit was saying don't do it. When people started to see how they were lying and manipulating, they said go for an emotionally driven headline that will dominate the press and manipulate people into reading news that can't be right or wrong.
100%. Yeah, and that's what's so insidious. It's the stories that aren't fake, like you said. This is something that actually happened. AOC's actually talking about this, but there is something we're being distracted from.
The easiest way, the most important takeaway from the whole thing is the story isn't true or false. And that's what's important for them. Get everybody emotionally charged up, demanding their right, but it's impossible because it's an opinion. Well, I can tell you one thing that's true or one thing that's false. Reddit did not say buy silver, and the media did lie when they claimed Reddit did. That is the red pill. Like that is a red pill that you can literally just hand to somebody and it's like dissolves in their skin. They don't even got to put it in their mouth. You just show them these two things and they're going to be like, that's insane. So immediately what happens is they run full speed and smack it out of your hand because they don't want you to show people what's actually going on. That's the point of these narratives. That's why the story was trending on Twitter. And it's not necessarily because I think anyone conspired to make it happen. What I think happens typically is you've got PR people who look for opportunities to shift the narrative. I don't think anybody had a meeting and they were like, AOC, can you do a video and do this? And then we're going to try and, highlight some individual. What happened was she told the story A bunch of special interests who want to shift the narrative saw the opportunity and used their PR tactics to do so. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., so come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.